The red sun of Velkara Prime cast bloody shadows across the battlefield. Commander Hyan stood on the observation deck of his crystal fortress, watching the latest reports flow across his screen. The numbers were bad. They were always bad these days. 23 years. That's how long this war had been going on. 23 years of fighting, dying, and getting nowhere. Hyan remembered when he was young, when the elders said this would be over in months. The Thurocs were just animals, they said. Smart animals, but still just creatures that grew their weapons instead of building them. How wrong they had been. Hyan's people, the Valith, were made of living crystal. Their bodies could bend light, create perfect shields, and build weapons that never missed their targets. They thought they were better than everyone else in the galaxy. They thought their crystal technology made them invincible. The Thurocs proved them wrong every single day. Across the battlefield, War Prime Deho felt the same frustration. His biomechanical body processed the latest battle data through neural implants that grew directly from his brain. The numbers told the same story they always did. Victory was close, but never close enough. Deho's people could grow weapons from their own bodies. They could heal from wounds that would kill others. They could adapt to any environment, any attack, any defense. When they fought as one giant organism, each warrior connected to every other through bio-neural links. But the Valith had those damn crystal shields. The war started over mining rights. Both species wanted the quantum crystals that grew on 17 different worlds. The crystals were rare, powerful, and worth more than entire star systems. At first, it was just competing claims. Then small fights. Then larger battles. Now it was total war. Every Valith world had been turned into a fortress. Their crystal cities grew weapons instead of art. Their children learned to fight before they learned to sing. Their elders calculated kill ratios instead of composing harmonic poems. Every Thuroc world had become a breeding ground. Their bio-cities pumped out warriors faster than factories made bullets. Their young were born with weapons for hands. Their old ones dissolved themselves into nutrients for the next generation of fighters. Both sides had forgotten what they were fighting for. They only remembered who they were fighting against. Hyan walked through his command center, watching his officers work. Captain Minji was studying Thuroc attack patterns, looking for weaknesses they could exploit. Her crystal form flickered with frustrated light as she found the same thing she always found. The Thurocs adapted too fast. Every weakness they discovered was fixed within days. Lieutenant Wanho reported the latest casualty numbers. 3 billion Valith had died in the past year alone, but the Thurocs had lost even more. It didn't matter. They grew new warriors faster than the Valith could kill them. The galaxy watched in horror. Other species sent diplomats, tried to negotiate peace, offered to mediate. Both sides ignored them. This war was too big now, too important. It had become about survival, about proving which species deserved to exist. Some worlds had been completely destroyed. Others were so poisoned by bioweapons or crystal radiation that nothing could live there for thousands of years. Entire star systems had been evacuated as the war spread across space like a disease. Deho felt the pain of his people through the bio-neural network that connected every Thuroc mind. Billions of his kind had died, their biomatter recycled into new warriors. It was efficient, but it hurt. Every death was felt by every living Thuroc. The Valith strategy was simple. Use their superior shields and precise weapons to hold defensive positions while their orbital platforms bombed Thurok breeding worlds from space. It was working, slowly. The Thurok population was finally starting to decrease. The Thurok strategy was equally simple. Overwhelm Valith defenses with endless waves of adaptive bioweapons while their deep space hunters destroyed Valith's supply lines. It was also working, slowly. The Valith were running out of resources to maintain their crystal fortresses. Both strategies were working. Both were also failing. The war was eating both civilizations alive. Hyan received a report from the outer system. Another Thurok bioship had been destroyed trying to reach the crystal mining platforms. But it had taken 2 Valith defenders with it. The math was simple and terrible. If they kept trading ships at this rate, both fleets would be gone within 5 years. Daeho got similar reports from his deep space hunters. They had destroyed a Valith supply convoy, but lost half their force doing it. The bioships could be regrown, but it took time. Time they might not have. The economic reports were even worse. Both civilizations had converted their entire societies into war machines. There was no civilian economy left. No art, no music, no literature. Only weapons, warriors, and death. Valith Crystal Gardens, once famous throughout the galaxy for their beauty, now grew nothing but weapon-grade crystals. Their harmonic songs, which could make other species weep with joy, had been replaced by tactical frequencies that could shatter Thurok bioarmor. Thurok biosculptures, living art that could evolve and change over centuries, had all been recycled into warrior biomass. Their genetic libraries, containing the patterns for millions of useful organisms, had been simplified down to just weapons and armor. The younger generation of both species had never known peace. Valith children were taught that Thuroks were monsters who wanted to eat their crystal hearts. Thurok young were programmed from birth to see Valith as crystal demons who wanted to freeze all life in perfect, dead order. Neither side was entirely wrong. The war had changed both species into something darker than they had ever been before. The Valith, once known for their wisdom and artistic beauty, had become cold and calculating killers. The Thuroks, once admired for their adaptability and life-giving biotechnology, had become a swarm of single-minded destroyers. But neither side could stop. To stop fighting meant admitting that 23 years of death had been for nothing. It meant facing the fact that they had destroyed themselves for a handful of crystals that no longer mattered. The galaxy was big enough for both species. There were enough crystal worlds for everyone, but the war had made that truth impossible to accept. Too much blood had been spilled. Too much hate had been grown. Hyan looked out at the stars, wondering if his people would still exist in another 23 years. Daeho stared at the same stars, asking himself the same question. Neither of them knew that their answer was approaching from the edge of the system. Ships with unknown signatures were moving toward their war. Ships that would change everything in ways that neither the crystalline Valith nor the biomechanical Thuroks could imagine. The eternal stalemate was about to become something else entirely. Something that would end the war not in victory or defeat, but in a way that neither side had ever considered possible. The humans were coming. 3 months after the latest Thurok offensive failed, something strange appeared at the edge of the Velkara system. The sensors picked it up first. Unusual energy readings that didn't match anything in either species' databases. Scientist Minji was working the night shift when the alert started flashing on her screen. She had been analyzing Thurok biosignatures, trying to find new ways to detect their stealth organisms. The work was boring and repetitive, but necessary. Every small advantage could save lives. The energy readings made her crystal form flicker, with surprise. She had never seen patterns like these before. They weren't the harmonic frequencies that Valeth technology used, but they also weren't the chaotic bioelectrical signals that came from Thurok ships. These were something completely different. Minji called her supervisor, but he was busy with casualty reports from the latest battle. She tried to analyze the signals herself, running them through every database the Valeth had collected over centuries of space travel. Nothing matched. The signals were organized, clearly artificial, but they didn't follow any known technological principles. They seemed to use electromagnetic patterns that both species had considered impossible or impractical. On the other side of the system, Thurok Intelligence Officer Wanho was having the same problem. His biosensors had detected metal compositions that made no sense. The approaching objects contained alloys that weren't in any Thurok genetic memory. Wanho's people could taste metal through space, analyzing the chemical signatures of enemy ships from incredible distances. It was one of their greatest advantages in the war. They always knew what the Valeth were building before the Crystal people finished building it, but these new ships tasted like nothing the Thuroks had ever encountered. The metal was refined, clearly artificial, but it followed patterns that seemed randomly complex. Most species used simple alloys for space travel, strong, light, cheap to produce. These newcomers seemed to use metals that were almost artistic in their complexity. Wanho reported his findings to War Prime Daeho, but the war leader was focused on planning the next attack on Valeth orbital platforms. The strange ships were still far away, probably just another species trying to establish trade routes through the system. The galaxy was full of minor species trying to profit from the war. Most of them sold weapons to both sides and tried to stay neutral. A few had tried to establish colonies on the outer worlds, hoping to claim territory while the Valeth and Thuroks were busy killing each other. Both sides usually ignored these small-time opportunists. Occasionally, they would destroy a few ships as a warning, but mostly they were too busy fighting each other to care about outsiders. But these new ships were different. They weren't broadcasting trade offers or colonization claims. They weren't running away when they detected the massive war fleets in the inner system. They were just watching. Minji spent 3 days trying to decode the signals. She used every cryptographic tool the Valeth had developed, every linguistic analysis program, every mathematical pattern recognition system. The signals remained stubbornly incomprehensible. Then she tried something different. Instead of trying to decode the signals, she tried to send a response. The Valeth had standard first contact protocols, mathematical sequences that any intelligent species should be able to understand. She transmitted prime numbers, then the Fibonacci sequence, then basic stellar cartography showing the local star systems. If the newcomers were intelligent, they should recognize these patterns and respond with similar mathematical concepts. The response came back in perfect Valeth harmonic language, not translated, not approximated, but flawless. The pronunciation was exactly right. The tonal frequencies were precisely calibrated. Even the subtle emotional undertones were correct. "We are humans," the message said. "We come seeking dialogue." Minji's crystal form went completely dark with shock. No species had ever learned Valeth harmonic language that quickly. It took years of study just to produce basic sounds. Perfect. Fluency was supposed to be impossible for non-crystal beings. She immediately contacted the High Command, but they were in emergency session. Reports were coming in from all over the system. The strange ships weren't just talking to the Valith, they were also communicating with the Thurroks. Wanho had tried the same first contact protocols from his end. Thurrok communication was based on biochemical signals, complex pheromone patterns that carried information through molecular structures. Each message was like a living organism, growing and changing as it moved through space. The response he received was perfect Thurrok biospeech, not just the basic chemical patterns, but the advanced emotional and contextual layers that took Thurrok children years to master. The newcomers were speaking as if they had been born into Thurrok bioneural networks. The message was identical to what the Valith had received, but delivered in flawless Thurrok style. "We are humans. We come seeking dialogue." The implications were terrifying. How long had these humans been watching? How much did they know about both species? And how had they learned to speak both languages so perfectly? Both sides immediately began preparing for the worst. If these humans could decode and speak their languages instantly, what else could they do? Were they some kind of advanced scouts for an invasion fleet? Were they weapons dealers looking to profit from the continuing war? The Valith High Command ordered all defensive positions to full alert. Their crystal shields powered up across the system, creating barriers that could stop anything short of a planet-cracker weapon. They had learned, over 23 years of war, never to trust anyone who claimed to come in peace. The Thurrok War. Council made similar preparations. Bioweapon factories increased production, growing new strains of combat organisms designed to fight unknown enemies. Deep space hunter packs moved to intercept positions, ready to swarm any hostile force. But the human ships didn't attack. They didn't even approach the main battle zones. They just maintained position at the edge of the system, broadcasting polite requests for dialogue. Minji found herself assigned to a first contact team, along with linguists and diplomats who specialized in dealing with alien species. She was excited and terrified at the same time. This was the most important discovery in Valith history, but it was also potentially the most dangerous. Wanho received similar orders from the Thurrok command structure. He would be part of the team that made contact with these mysterious humans. His bioform was already adapting, growing new sensory organs designed to detect threats that his people had never encountered before. The human ships were patient. They waited for responses to their dialogue requests, broadcasting mathematical concepts and stellar maps that showed they understood local space very well. They seemed to know exactly where both fleets were positioned, which worlds were still habitable, and which systems had been destroyed by the war. This knowledge was almost as unsettling as their perfect language skills. Most of the destroyed worlds weren't marked on any public star charts. The locations of major fleet bases were classified secrets. Yet the humans seemed to have complete intelligence about everything that had happened in the system. After a week of careful consideration, both sides decided to risk making contact. The war had reached a stalemate anyway, and these humans might represent either a new threat that needed to be eliminated or a new opportunity that could tip the balance. The Valith prepared their most advanced diplomatic ship, equipped with the finest crystal harmonics and defensive systems. If the humans proved hostile, the ship could defend itself long enough to transmit warnings back to the main fleet. The Thurroks grew a special bioship designed for first contact, filled with adaptive organisms that could respond to unknown weapons or environmental hazards. If these humans tried to use biological weapons, the ship would survive long enough to analyze the threat. Both diplomatic missions launched at the same time, heading for different human ships. Neither side told the other about their plans, but Both were thinking the same thing. These humans were either the answer to ending the war, or they were about to make it much worse. The humans waited patiently as both diplomatic ships approached. Their response was the same to each mission. "Welcome. We have been waiting to meet you." Somehow, that simple statement was even more unsettling than their perfect language skills. How long had they been waiting? And what exactly did they want? Admiral Tehoon stood on the bridge of the UES Seoul, watching the two alien fleets position themselves across the Velkara system. 23 years of war had turned this place into a graveyard. Broken ships floated between the planets, and several worlds showed the scars of orbital bombardment. His mission was simple in theory, complicated in practice. Earth's expansion into this galactic sector needed stable neighbors, not civilizations trying to destroy each other. The Valith and Thurox were both advanced species with technologies that could benefit humanity, but they were so busy killing each other that they were becoming useless as potential allies. The human fleet had been watching the war for months before announcing their presence. Long-range sensors and stealth probes had mapped every battle, recorded every communication, analyzed every tactic. By the time they revealed themselves, they knew more about both species than either side knew about each other. Captain Jisoo prepared her shuttle for the first diplomatic mission to the Valith command station. Her training in xenoanthropology had taught her to recognize cultural patterns, and the Valith showed classic signs of a perfectionist society under extreme stress. Their crystal technology was beautiful, precise, and incredibly advanced. But their recent communications showed signs of rigid thinking, absolute positions, and growing paranoia. They had been at war so long that they saw enemies everywhere. Jisoo's shuttle approached the Valith station slowly, broadcasting peaceful intentions and following their prescribed approach vectors. The crystal structure was magnificent, growing from a central core like a living jewel. But weapons ports tracked her movement, and shield generators hummed with barely contained energy. Commander Hyon met her in the station's central chamber, a room where crystal walls created perfect acoustic harmony. Every sound was enhanced and purified, turning simple speech into something like music. Jisoo could understand why the Valith valued precision so highly when they lived surrounded by such perfect order. "You speak our language perfectly," Hyon said, his crystal form flickering with curiosity and suspicion. "How is this possible?" Jisoo smiled, knowing that her expression would be transmitted through the harmonic crystals as emotional undertones. "Humans are good at learning languages quickly. We had some time to study while we observed your situation." "How long were you watching us?" The question carried harmonics of fear and anger. "Long enough to understand that both your people and the Thurox are trapped in a war neither side can win," Jisoo replied honestly. "We didn't come here to take sides. We came because we need stable neighbors, not civilizations destroying themselves." Yeon's form brightened with interest. Here was a species that understood strategic thinking, that could see beyond the immediate battle to long-term consequences. "The Thurox are biomechanical parasites," he said. "They grow weapons from their own bodies and spread across worlds like a disease. If they are not stopped, they will consume everything." Meanwhile, Lieutenant Colonel Seokjin was having a very different conversation on a Thurok bioship. The vessel was alive, its walls pulsing with biological rhythms, its corridors shifting and adapting as he walked through them. His military background had prepared him for unusual environments, but this was like being inside a giant organism. War Prime Deho greeted him in a chamber that felt more like a living heart than a conference room. The biomechanical warrior was impressive, his form a perfect blend of organic tissue and integrated technology. Neural cables connected him directly to the ship's systems, making him part of the vessel itself. "Your people have strong metal taste," Daiho said, using the Thurok biochemical communication that carried meaning through molecular structures. "But you are small numbers. Why do you come to a war place?" Seokjin had studied Thurok communication patterns during the long journey to this system. Their language was direct, practical, focused on immediate survival and tactical advantage. "Humans believe in adaptation," he replied, choosing words that would resonate with Thurok values. "But we also believe that some battles create more problems than they solve." Deho's bioform rippled with something like amusement. "The Crystal People make dead order from life chaos. They build perfect structures that cannot grow, cannot change. If they win, all life becomes crystal static." Both human diplomats were hearing the same story from different perspectives. Each side believed the other represented an existential threat to their way of life. Each side had legitimate fears and reasonable grievances. But both had been fighting so long that compromise seemed impossible. Jisoo spent hours with Veilith leaders, learning about their culture and technology. Their crystal structures could manipulate light, energy, and matter in ways that seemed almost magical. They had achieved a level of technological precision that humans could barely understand, but their society had become rigid, militaristic, focused entirely on defending against Thurok attacks. Their art had become propaganda. Their science had become weapons research. Their children were taught to fight before they learned to create. "Before the war," Hyun admitted during a private moment, "we were explorers, artists, builders of beautiful things. Now we only know how to make weapons and walls." Seokjin discovered similar changes among the Thuroks. Their biotechnology was incredibly advanced, able to create living tools that could adapt to any environment or challenge. They could grow spacecraft, weapons, even habitats from specially designed organisms. But the war had turned their creativity toward destruction. Instead of growing gardens that could feed millions, they grew weapons that could kill millions. Instead of developing organisms that could heal diseases, they created plagues designed to destroy Veilith crystal matrices. "Before the war," Deho told him, "we grew life beauty, made world gardens that sang with bioharmony. Now we only grow death tools and weapon children." Both diplomats realized that the two species were more alike than different. Both had been peaceful, creative civilizations before the war. Both had been forced to become something they never wanted to be. Both were trapped in a conflict that was destroying everything they had once valued. The formal negotiations began 3 days later. Representatives from both sides met on neutral ground aboard one of the human ships. Admiral Tae-hoon hosted the meeting in the Seoul's main conference room, a simple space designed to be comfortable for various alien physiologies. The Veilith delegation arrived in perfect formation, their crystal forms creating harmonic resonances that filled the room with beautiful sounds. The Thurok delegation grew their way aboard, biomechanical forms adapting to the ship's atmosphere and gravity as they moved. Captain Jisoo presented the human proposal. "Both of your civilizations are destroying yourselves fighting over resources that are no longer worth the cost of war. We propose a ceasefire while we work together to find solutions that benefit everyone." The response was immediate and negative from both sides. "Impossible," Hyon said, his harmonic voice carrying absolute certainty. The Thurocs cannot be trusted. They will use any ceasefire to grow new weapons and prepare stronger attacks. Cannot work, Daeho agreed, his biochemical signals carrying equal conviction. Crystal people use peacetime to build stronger walls and better death lights. Ceasefire means they prepare to kill all Thuroc life. Lieutenant Colonel Seokjin tried a different approach. What if we could guarantee that neither side would use a ceasefire to prepare for war? Both alien leaders looked at him with expressions that clearly said he didn't understand the situation. They had been fighting for 23 years. Trust was impossible. Peace was impossible. One side had to win, or both sides would eventually lose everything. Admiral Tae-hoon made one final attempt. What would it take for both sides to consider ending this war? The answer came from both leaders at almost the same time. The complete surrender of the enemy, Hyon said. Total victory over Crystal people, Daeho said. Jisoo and Seokjin exchanged glances with their admiral. The aliens weren't being unreasonable, exactly. They were just trapped in a situation where compromise looked like suicide and continued fighting looked like the only survival strategy. The meeting ended with polite expressions of respect for human intentions, but firm refusals to consider any peace proposals. Both sides thanked the humans for trying to help, but made it clear that outsiders couldn't understand the true nature of their conflict. As the alien delegations returned to their fleets, Admiral Tae-hoon called his senior staff together. The diplomatic approach had failed, exactly as they had expected it would. Both species were too committed to the war to accept any solution that didn't involve complete victory. That meant it was time for Plan B. The humans would have to show both sides that their war was pointless, not through negotiation, but through demonstration. They would have to prove that continuing to fight was more dangerous than making peace. It was time to show the galaxy what human military technology could really do. Back aboard the UES Seoul, Admiral Tae-hoon gathered his senior staff in the secure briefing room. The diplomatic mission had confirmed what their long-range observations had suggested. Both alien species were locked in a psychological trap that made peace impossible through normal negotiations. Commander Soo-young activated the holographic display, showing detailed tactical analyses of both fleets. Her months of observation had revealed every strength and weakness of both civilizations' military forces. The Valith excel at defensive warfare, she began, highlighting crystal formations throughout the system. Their shields can absorb enormous amounts of energy, and their weapons are incredibly precise. They never waste shots, never miss targets, never leave enemies half dead. The display shifted to show Thuroc bioships swarming around Valith positions. The Thurocs dominate through numbers and adaptation. They can regrow damaged ships, evolve new weapons during battle, and coordinate attacks through bio-neural networks that make them fight like a single organism. Intelligence Officer Jong-ho had spent weeks analyzing intercepted communications from both sides. His findings were disturbing, but not surprising. Both civilizations have restructured their entire societies around this war. There is no civilian economy left on either side. No art, no entertainment, no non-military science. He brought up economic data that told a grim story. Valith crystal gardens that once created beautiful sculptures now produce only weapon-grade materials. Thuroc bio-cities that once grew food and medicine now generate nothing but warriors and weapons. The psychological profiles were even more revealing. Children on both sides are raised from birth to see the enemy as monsters. Valith young are taught that Thurocs want to consume their crystal hearts. Thurok children are programmed to believe Valith want to freeze all life in crystal prisons. Dr. Yuna, the fleet's xenobiologist, had been studying both species' biological and technological capabilities. Her analysis revealed something that neither side seemed to recognize. Despite their apparent differences, the Valith and Thurocs are remarkably similar, she said, displaying comparative data. Both species are highly intelligent, technologically advanced, and naturally creative. Under normal circumstances, they would probably be natural allies. She showed examples of pre-war Valith crystal art and Thurok biosculptures. Both civilizations had created works of incredible beauty and complexity. Both had been peaceful explorers and traders before the war began. The real tragedy is that they're destroying the very qualities that made them great civilizations, Yuna continued. The Valith are losing their artistic vision, becoming cold and mechanical. The Thurocs are losing their life-giving creativity, becoming focused only on death and destruction. Admiral Tehun studied the data carefully. The situation was even worse than he had feared. Both species were trapped not just in a military stalemate, but in a psychological death spiral. They couldn't stop fighting because their entire identities now depended on being at war. Standard diplomatic solutions won't work, he concluded. Both sides are psychologically incapable of accepting peace while they still see each other as existential threats. Commander Su-Yung agreed. Any ceasefire would just give both sides time to prepare for an even more destructive phase of the war. They're past the point where they can trust each other enough to negotiate. The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. Humanity needed these two species as stable neighbors, not as self-destructing war machines. But traditional peacekeeping methods were useless when both sides preferred mutual destruction to compromise. Jong-ho spoke up with a controversial suggestion. What if we force them to stop fighting? You mean military intervention? Tehun asked. Not conquest, Jong-ho clarified. Demonstration. Both sides continue fighting because they believe they can still win. What if we showed them that victory is impossible? What if we proved that there's a third option they haven't considered? Dr. Yuna looked interested. You're talking about shock therapy. Break their psychological fixation on the war by showing them something that makes their entire conflict irrelevant. Su-Yung was already running tactical calculations. It would have to be overwhelming, not just superior technology, but completely different levels of capability. We'd need to demonstrate that continuing their war is pointless. The discussion continued for hours as they worked out the details. The plan would require careful timing, precise execution, and a level of military demonstration that would leave no doubt about human capabilities. Admiral Tehun made the final decision. We'll implement Operation Harmony. Our goal is to preserve both civilizations while forcing them to recognize that their war serves no useful purpose. The operation would have 3 phases. First, they would gather detailed intelligence on every military installation, defensive position, and strategic asset in the system. This would require stealth reconnaissance that neither side could detect. Second, they would demonstrate that human technology could penetrate any defense either species possessed. This would involve controlled demonstrations that showed capability, without causing actual harm. Third, they would display such overwhelming military superiority that both sides would realize continued fighting was futile. The key was to do this without destroying either civilization or humiliating their leaders. The biggest challenge will be preserving their dignity, Tehun explained. If we make them look foolish or weak, they'll fight us instead of each other. We need to show them that humans are so far beyond their current conflict that resistance is meaningless, but cooperation is beneficial. Captain Hagen would lead the stealth reconnaissance phase. Her ships were equipped with the latest human cloaking technology, systems that could hide from any known detection method. They would map every military installation while broadcasting false diplomatic signals. Dr. Yuna would handle the biological demonstration. Human synthetic biology was centuries ahead of even Thurok biotechnology. She could create harmless but visible organisms that would show both species how vulnerable they really were. Commander Su-Yung would coordinate the technological demonstration. Human cyber warfare capabilities could penetrate any computer system, communication network, or automated defense grid. The aliens would discover that their most secure systems were completely open to human intrusion. The final phase would be Admiral Tae-hoon's responsibility. The human fleet would reveal its true capabilities in a display of military power that would end any thoughts of resistance, but it would be done in a way that offered alliance rather than demanding surrender. Remember, Tae-hoon told his staff, we're not trying to conquer these species. We're trying to save them from themselves. The goal is to turn enemies into allies, not to create new enemies. Over the next several days, human ships moved into position throughout the system. The aliens saw what appeared to be a small diplomatic fleet, 12 vessels maintaining peaceful orbits while negotiations continued. In reality, 60 human warships were hiding in the system, protected by cloaking technology that made them invisible to both Valeth crystal sensors and Thurok biodetectors. The entire human battle group was ready to reveal itself at the right moment. Captain Hagen's reconnaissance teams worked around the clock, mapping every strategic installation. They discovered that both sides had built defenses that were impressive by galactic standards, but laughably primitive by human standards. Dr. Yuna's biological labs prepared harmless synthetic organisms designed to demonstrate human biological capabilities. Within hours of release, they would make their presence known to both species in ways that couldn't be ignored or misunderstood. Commander Su-Young's cyber warfare teams tested the defenses of both civilizations, finding security systems that looked strong but had vulnerabilities that human technology could exploit instantly. Everything was ready. Operation Harmony would begin with a simple biological demonstration that would prove to both species that their entire war was based on outdated assumptions about military power and technological capability. The humans were about to show the galaxy that some conflicts could only be ended by overwhelming display of superior force, applied with precision and restraint. Operation Harmony began at exactly 0600 system time, though neither the Valeth nor the Thuroks knew anything had started. Captain Hagen's stealth ships had spent the night moving into final positions around every major military installation in the system. Her reconnaissance teams used human jump drive technology, a method of faster-than-light travel that left no detectable energy signature. Both alien species used different FTL systems that created obvious traces, so they had no way to track human ship movements. From the bridge of her stealth cruiser, Hagen watched as her teams completed their final scans. Every Valeth crystal, fortress, every Thurok biofactory, every orbital platform and defensive station had been mapped down to the smallest detail. The aliens thought they were still negotiating with a small diplomatic fleet. They had no idea that 60 human warships were already in position, ready to demonstrate capabilities that would end their war in a matter of hours. Dr. Yuna initiated the first phase from her laboratory aboard the Soul. human synthetic biology, had developed organisms that could survive in any environment, adapt to any conditions, and carry any desired genetic payload. For this demonstration, she had created something special. The organisms she released were completely harmless, but impossible to ignore. They were designed to interact with both Valith crystal matrices and Thurok biomechanical systems in ways that would be obviously artificial but entirely benign. Within hours of release, every Valith crystal formation in the system began glowing with soft blue light. The effect was beautiful, almost artistic, but it was also deeply unsettling. The crystals were responding to organisms that no Valith scientist could identify or understand. Commander Hyon watched from his flagship as crystal structures throughout his fleet began displaying the strange blue illumination. His scientists ran every test they could think of, but the organisms causing the effect were unlike anything in their databases. "It's definitely artificial," scientist Minji reported, her crystal form flickering with concern. "But it's not Thurok biotechnology. This is something completely different, something we've never seen before." The effect was spreading faster than any known biological agent. Whatever the humans had released, it could penetrate Valith crystal shields as if they didn't exist. It was reaching every installation, every ship, every defensive position simultaneously. On the Thurok side, War Prime Deho was experiencing something equally disturbing. Every bioweapon in his arsenal had sprouted bright orange markings that glowed like warning lights. The patterns were obviously artificial, clearly designed, but no Thurok genetic memory contained anything similar. Intelligence Officer Wanho tried to analyze the organisms responsible, but they seemed to exist on the edge of Thurok biosensory capability. "These are life forms," he reported, "but they follow patterns that no natural evolution would create. They are built life, designed life, made by intelligence we cannot taste understand." The implications were terrifying for both species. If humans could deploy biological agents that penetrated every defense system, what else could they do? If human organisms could interact with Valith crystals and Thurok biotechnology simultaneously, how advanced was their science? Dr. Yuna monitored the effects from her laboratory, pleased with the results. The synthetic organisms were performing exactly as designed, creating visible proof of human biological capabilities without causing any actual harm. Both alien species were getting the message loud and clear. The second phase began immediately. Commander Su Yung's cyber warfare teams activated programs they had been preparing for weeks. Human-computer technology was centuries ahead of anything either alien species possessed. Every communication network in the system suddenly displayed the same message in both Valith harmonic language and Thurok biochemical signals: "Your security is an illusion." The message appeared on military command screens, personal communication devices, internal ship networks, and even closed-circuit systems that were supposed to be completely isolated. Human hackers had penetrated every computer system simultaneously. Hyon stared at his command console in shock. The Valith had spent decades developing crystal-based computing systems that were supposed to be unhackable. Their harmonic encryption was based on quantum resonance patterns that should have been impossible for outsiders to decode. Yet humans had not only broken their encryption, they had done it so completely that they could display messages on systems that weren't even connected to external networks. The demonstration of cyber warfare capability was absolute and undeniable. Daiho was experiencing the same shock on the Thurok side. Biomechanical computer systems were supposed to be protected by living firewalls that could adapt to any intrusion attempt. Their neural networks should have been incomprehensible to non-biological intelligence. But human programs were running on every Thurok system, displaying messages in perfect biochemical language while bypassing every security measure. The scale of the intrusion was impossible to comprehend. Both alien leaders realized they were facing a species with technological capabilities far beyond anything they had imagined. The humans weren't just more advanced, they were operating on completely different levels of scientific understanding. Admiral Taehoon watched the reactions from both fleets, satisfied that the demonstration was having the desired effect. Both species were beginning to understand that their entire war was being fought with obsolete technology and outdated strategies. But the real demonstration was yet to come. Phase 3 began when the human fleet revealed its true size and capabilities. What had appeared to be 12 diplomatic vessels suddenly became 60 warships as cloaking systems shut down throughout the system. The ships that materialized weren't just more numerous than expected, they were unlike anything either species had ever seen. Human warship design followed principles that seemed to ignore the physical laws that limited other civilizations' technology. Captain Jisoo broadcast from her position near the Valith fleet. "We regret the deception, but it was necessary to demonstrate certain realities about your conflict." Lieutenant Colonel Seok Jin transmitted simultaneously to the Thurok forces. "Humans prefer honest negotiation, but sometimes truth requires practical demonstration." Both alien fleets went to full combat alert, but their weapons systems couldn't lock on to the human ships. The vessels seemed to exist in a state of quantum uncertainty, solid enough to be seen, but insubstantial enough to avoid targeting. Human defensive technology used principles that neither the crystal-based Valith systems nor the biomechanical Thurok sensors could understand. The ships were there, obviously real, clearly armed, but somehow untouchable. Admiral Taehoon opened communication channels to both fleet commanders simultaneously. His message was simple and direct. "Your war ends now, not because we demand it, but because continuing to fight serves no useful purpose." The demonstrations had proven 3 critical points. Human biological science could penetrate any defense either species possessed. Human computer technology could compromise any system either side had built. Human military technology operated on levels that made conventional warfare obsolete, but the humans weren't demanding surrender. They weren't claiming territory or imposing terms. They were simply stating a fact. The war was over because continuing it was pointless. Hyun and Daiho both realized they faced a choice. They could attempt to fight a species that had just demonstrated overwhelming technological superiority, or they could accept that their old conflict had become irrelevant in the face of new realities. The war that had raged for 23 years was about to end, not through victory or defeat, but through the recognition that both sides had been fighting with toys while adults watched from the sidelines. The humans had shown their power. Now they would show their wisdom. The final demonstration began with a display of precision that left both alien fleets speechless. Major Gyeongsu coordinated the human attack from the tactical center of the Seoul, watching as 60 warships moved into position around every military installation in the system. The timing was perfect. At exactly 1200 system time, human weapons fired simultaneously at hundreds of targets throughout Velkara Prime and its surrounding space. But these weren't killing shots. They were surgical strikes designed to disable rather than destroy. Every Valith shield generator shut down at the same moment. The crystal matrices that had protected their installations for decades simply stopped working. Not destroyed, but somehow turned off. The energy patterns that powered their defenses were disrupted in ways that Valeth science couldn't explain. Commander Hyan watched in amazement as his flagship's main shields flickered and died. The crystal formations remained intact, but they no longer responded to harmonic commands. It was as if human weapons could speak directly to Valeth technology, telling it to stop working. On every Valeth installation, the same thing was happening. Orbital platforms went dark, defensive stations fell silent, and fortress shields collapsed. Not a single crystal was shattered, not a single Valeth was injured, but their entire military infrastructure became useless in a matter of minutes. The Thurok biofactories suffered a similar fate. Human weapons deployed nanobots that dissolved biometal structures with surgical precision, causing weapon systems to fall apart while leaving living tissue completely unharmed. War Prime Deho felt his bioship's weapon systems dissolving around him. The living metal that formed his cannons and missile launchers simply came apart at the molecular level, separating into harmless organic compounds that his ship's immune system absorbed without difficulty. Throughout the Thurok fleet, bioweapons were being systematically dismantled by microscopic machines that could apparently distinguish between military hardware and living organisms. Warriors remained healthy and unharmed, but their weapons became nothing more than raw biological material. The precision was impossible to comprehend. Human technology could target specific molecular structures while leaving everything else untouched. They could disable military systems without harming the people who operated them. But the real shock came when human construction ships appeared at the edge of the system. These vessels were unlike anything either species had ever seen. Massive, industrial platforms that seemed to bend space around themselves as they worked. Lieutenant Colonel Seok Jin broadcast an explanation as the construction began. Humans believe that true strength comes from the ability to build, not just destroy. We will now demonstrate what we can create. The human ships began assembling something enormous in the empty space between the two fleets. Using manufacturing techniques that defied both Valeth and Thurok understanding of physics, they were building a space station from raw materials that seemed to appear out of nowhere. Matter converters took asteroids and transformed them into refined metals and complex components. Energy shapers formed those materials into precise structures using forces that neither alien species could identify. Assembly drones worked with impossible speed and accuracy to put everything together. What would have taken either alien civilization years to construct was taking shape in hours. The station grew like a living thing, but with the precision of the finest Valeth crystal work and the adaptability of the most advanced Thurok biotechnology. Scientist Minji tried to analyze the construction process, but her instruments couldn't identify half the technologies being used. They're manipulating matter at the quantum level, she reported to Hyan. But their methods don't match any known physics. It's as if they're using scientific principles we haven't discovered yet. Intelligence. Officer Wonho was equally baffled by what he observed. The metal taste is wrong, he told Deho. They are making new materials from nothing space, building with patterns that no biomemory contains. This is impossible science. The station took shape rapidly, revealing its purpose as it grew. It was a defensive platform, equipped with shield, generators powerful enough to protect entire worlds. But the shields weren't designed to protect human interests. They were positioned to defend both Valeth and Thurok planets from further bombardment. Admiral Taehoon's voice filled the system as the station came online. This platform will prevent either side from continuing orbital attacks. Its shields are more powerful than anything either of your civilizations possess, and they are programmed to protect both species equally. The demonstration was complete, but its implications were staggering. Humans had disabled both fleets without firing a single lethal shot. They had built defensive systems more advanced than anything either species could imagine, and they had done it all in less than 6 hours. The message was clear. Human military technology operated on levels that made conventional warfare obsolete. But instead of using that power to conquer or destroy, they had used it to create protection for both species. Commander Hyan realized that resistance was not just futile, it was meaningless. How could anyone fight an enemy that could disable your weapons without harming your people, then build defenses to protect you from your real enemies? War Prime Daeho came to the same conclusion through different reasoning. His people valued adaptation above all else, and the smart adaptation to this situation was obvious. Fighting humans would be like bacteria trying to fight doctors. The scale of technological difference made conflict impossible, but the humans weren't acting like conquerors. They had demonstrated overwhelming power, then used it to protect both species rather than subjugate them. This suggested possibilities that neither alien leader had considered. Dr. Yuna's voice joined the general broadcast. Human science offers solutions to problems that both your species face. Our medicine could extend Valith crystal matrix lifespans and improve Thurok biomechanical integration. Our technology could help rebuild your worlds and restore your civilizations. The offer was tempting, but both alien leaders were suspicious. What did humans want in return for their help? What was the price of accepting aid from a species that had just demonstrated the ability to destroy both civilizations without effort? Admiral Taehoon seemed to read their thoughts. Humans don't seek to dominate other species. We seek to learn from them and work with them. Your technologies, combined with ours, could benefit all 3 civilizations. Captain Jisoo elaborated from her position near the Valith fleet. Valith crystal harmonics could revolutionize human energy systems. Your precision and artistic vision could help us build better, more beautiful technologies. Lieutenant Colonel Seokjin addressed the Thurok similarly. Thurok biomechanical integration represents biological engineering possibilities that humans are only beginning to explore. Your adaptive abilities could help us develop better medical treatments and environmental technologies. The humans were offering partnership, not conquest. They wanted to learn from both species while sharing their own knowledge, but the demonstrations had made it clear that this offer came from a position of absolute strength. Both alien fleets faced the same choice. They could accept that their war was over and try to build something new with human help, or they could continue fighting a conflict that no longer made any sense. The war that had consumed both civilizations for 23 years had ended in 6 hours, not through victory or defeat, but through the recognition that there were bigger things in the universe than their old hatred. The humans had shown that true power lay not in the ability to destroy enemies, but in the wisdom to turn enemies into allies. The real question now was whether the Valith and Thuroks were ready to learn that lesson. 1 year after the war ended, Commander Hyan stood in the ruins of what had once been a contested battlefield. But he wasn't alone. War Prime Daeho worked beside him, and together they were uncovering artifacts from both their civilizations. Shared history. The archaeological site had been discovered by human orbital scanners, buried beneath decades of battle damage. Pre-war ruins showed evidence of Valith and Thurok cooperation that both species had forgotten during the long years of fighting. "Our ancestors traded here," Deho observed, his biomechanical sensors identifying Thurok genetic traces in crystal formations that were obviously Valith in origin. They built together, learned from each other. Hyon's harmonic analysis revealed similar evidence. These crystal resonance patterns show biomechanical influences. Our people didn't just trade, they collaborated on technologies that neither species could create alone. The dig site had become a symbol of what both civilizations were working to rebuild. Not just peace, but the partnership that had existed before fear and misunderstanding led to war. Dr. Yuna supervised the archaeological work from her mobile research station, but her real focus was on the living cooperation happening all around her. Former enemies were working together with an efficiency that impressed even human observers. The research station itself was a marvel of combined engineering. Valith crystal frameworks provided perfect structural harmony, while Thurok biosystems created adaptive living walls that could adjust to any environmental change. Human technology integrated both approaches into something greater than the sum of its parts. Scientist Minji had spent months learning human scientific methods, and her reports were helping other Valith understand how human diversity worked. One species, but so many different approaches to solving problems, she marveled during her daily recordings. They maintain unity while celebrating differences. Her analysis was helping Valith society rediscover its own capacity for creative diversity. Before the war, different Valith communities had specialized in different types of crystal work, creating a rich tapestry of related but distinct cultural traditions. Intelligence Officer Wanho was conducting similar studies of human military organization. His findings were influencing Thurok, adoption of human-style defensive strategies that emphasized protection over aggression. "Human warriors fight to preserve, not to destroy," he reported to the new Thurok Peace Council. "Their strength comes from knowing what they defend, not just what they oppose." The planet that had once hosted the bloodiest battles now housed multiple research complexes where all three species worked on joint projects. The largest facility was dedicated to quantum crystallography, combining Valith precision with Thurok adaptability and human innovation. The quantum crystals that had started the war were now being produced artificially in quantities that made the original mining disputes seem ridiculous. More importantly, the research was revealing new applications that none of the three species had imagined alone. Captain Jisoo had established permanent diplomatic quarters on the main research station, serving as humanity's ambassador to both species. Her work involved much more than traditional diplomacy. She was helping to create new forms of interspecies cooperation that had never been tried before. "The real challenge isn't managing conflicts between species," she explained during a conference with other human ambassadors. "It's helping different kinds of intelligence work together to solve problems that none of them could handle alone." Lieutenant Colonel Seok Jin had taken on a different role, training combined security forces that included volunteers from all three species. The guards who protected the research facilities were living examples of interspecies cooperation. Valith, precision, Thurok adaptability, and human flexibility, he told his mixed classes. Each species contributes different strengths to create better solutions for everyone. The security forces had become something like cultural ambassadors, showing both civilian populations that cooperation wasn't just possible, but actually superior to the old competitive approaches. Admiral Tehun's fleet had evolved into a permanent, peacekeeping presence throughout the sector. The human ships no longer hid their capabilities, but they also no longer needed to demonstrate them. Both species had accepted that human military technology was simply beyond their ability to challenge. More importantly, both species had discovered that they didn't want to challenge it. Human protection allowed them to focus on rebuilding their civilizations rather than defending against each other. The space station that had been built during the original demonstration had expanded into a major diplomatic and trade hub. Representatives from dozens of other species now came to study the successful integration of three very different civilizations. Captain Hagen managed the station's operations, coordinating trade agreements and research partnerships that were spreading the benefits of cooperation throughout the local galactic region. Other species are asking how we ended a 23-year war in 6 hours, she reported to Admiral Tehun during one of their regular meetings. The real answer is that we didn't end their war. We showed them how to end it themselves. The economic integration was proceeding faster than anyone had expected. Valith crystal technology, Thurok bioengineering, and human manufacturing were creating products that revolutionized everyday life for all three species. Combined medical technology could heal injuries that would have been fatal just years before. Integrated communication systems allowed real-time translation between harmonic, biochemical, and electromagnetic signals. Hybrid architecture created buildings that were simultaneously beautiful, adaptive, and efficient. The younger generation was leading this integration. Children who had grown up during the war were now young adults who saw interspecies cooperation as normal and natural. Young Valith artists created crystal sculptures that incorporated living biomechanical components. Young Thurok engineers grew biosystems that responded to harmonic commands. Young humans learned to work with both crystal and biotechnologies as naturally as they worked with metal and electronics. The first anniversary celebration was held at the main research station, with representatives from all three species gathering to commemorate the end of the war and the beginning of their alliance. War Prime Deho, now serving as Thurok Ambassador for Life Sciences, addressed the mixed crowd in all three languages simultaneously. We thought strength meant the power to destroy enemies. We learned that true strength means the wisdom to create allies. Commander Hyon, now director of Valith Cultural Restoration, spoke about the rediscovery of his people's artistic traditions. War taught us to build weapons. Peace is teaching us to build wonders. Admiral Tehun concluded the ceremony with words that would be remembered throughout the sector. To the war that ended not in victory or defeat, but in the recognition that some battles are too important to fight, and some enemies too valuable to destroy. The celebration continued for days, but it was more than just a party. It was a demonstration to the galaxy that interspecies cooperation could create something better than any single civilization could achieve alone. The former enemies had become partners in the truest sense. Their combined knowledge was accelerating. Technological advancement throughout the sector. Their joint colonies were becoming models for interspecies community building. Their integrated military forces were providing security for dozens of smaller civilizations. Dr. Yuna's final report to Earth summarized the transformation. Both species have not only recovered from their war, they have become stronger than they ever were before it began. The integration of their technologies with ours is producing advances that none of our species could have achieved independently. The quantum crystal research had led to breakthroughs in faster-than-light communication. The combined biocrystal medical technology was revolutionizing healing throughout known space. The integrated defensive systems were providing protection for entire star systems. But the most important achievement was less tangible. 3 very different species had learned to work together as equals, each contributing their unique strengths, while learning from the other's expertise. The war that had consumed 2 civilizations for decades was now remembered mainly as the prelude to an alliance that was changing the galaxy. The hate that had once seemed eternal had been transformed into cooperation that promised to endure for millennia. Young beings of all 3 species were growing up in a universe where interspecies cooperation was normal, where different kinds of intelligence were valued for their diversity, and where conflicts were resolved through creativity rather than violence. The human fleet remained in the sector, but their role had evolved from peacekeepers to partners. They were no longer preventing war between former enemies. They were helping to build a future that none of the 3 species could have imagined alone. As Admiral Tae-hoon looked out at the thriving stations, the joint colonies, and the mixed crews working throughout the sector, he realized that humanity had gained something more valuable than territory or resources. They had gained allies who would stand with them as they continued to explore the galaxy's infinite possibilities. Turkey, war that had lasted decades and ended in hours, had become the foundation for a peace that would last forever. 1 year after the war ended, Commander Hyan stood in the ruins of what had once been a contested battlefield. But he wasn't alone. War Prime Daeho worked beside him, and together they were uncovering artifacts from both their civilizations. Shared history. The archaeological site had been discovered by human orbital scanners buried beneath decades of battle damage. Pre-war ruins showed evidence of Valith and Thurok cooperation that both species had forgotten during the long years of fighting. Our ancestors traded here, Daeho observed, his biomechanical sensors identifying Thurok genetic traces in crystal formations that were obviously Valith in origin. They built together, learned from each other. Hyon's harmonic analysis revealed similar evidence. These crystal resonance patterns show biomechanical influences. Our people didn't just trade, they collaborated on technologies that neither species could create alone. The dig site had become a symbol of what both civilizations were working to rebuild. Not just peace, but the partnership that had existed before fear and misunderstanding led to war. Dr. Yuna supervised the archaeological work from her mobile research station, but her real focus was on the living cooperation happening all around her. Former enemies were working together with an efficiency that impressed even human observers. The research station itself was a marvel of combined engineering. Valith crystal frameworks provided perfect structural harmony, while Thurok biosystems created adaptive living walls that could adjust to any environmental change. Human technology integrated both approaches into something greater than the sum of its parts. Scientist Minji had spent months learning human scientific methods, and her reports were helping other Valith understand how human diversity worked. One species, but so many different approaches to solving problems, she marveled during her daily recordings. They maintain unity while celebrating differences. Her analysis was helping Valith society rediscover its own capacity for creative diversity. Before the war, different Valith communities had specialized in different types of crystal work, creating a rich tapestry of related but distinct cultural traditions. Intelligence Officer Wonho was conducting similar studies of human military organization. His findings were influencing Thurok adoption of human-style defensive strategies that emphasized protection over aggression. Human warriors fight to preserve, not to destroy, he reported to the new Thurok Peace Council. Their strength comes from knowing what they defend, not just what they oppose. The planet that had once hosted the bloodiest battles now housed multiple research complexes where all three species worked on joint projects. The largest facility was dedicated to quantum crystallography, combining Valeth precision with Thurok, adaptability, and human innovation. The quantum crystals that had started the war were now being produced artificially in quantities that made the original mining disputes seem ridiculous. More importantly, the research was revealing new applications that none of the three species had imagined alone. Captain Jisoo had established permanent diplomatic quarters on the main research station, serving as humanity's ambassador to both species. Her work involved much more than traditional diplomacy. She was helping to create new forms of interspecies cooperation that had never been tried before. The real challenge isn't managing conflicts between species, she explained during a conference with other human ambassadors. It's helping different kinds of intelligence work together to solve problems that none of them could handle alone. Lieutenant Colonel Seok Jin had taken on a different role, training combined security forces that included volunteers from all three species. The guards who protected the research facilities were living examples of interspecies cooperation. Valeth, precision, Thurok adaptability, and human flexibility, he told his mixed classes. Each species contributes different strengths to create better solutions for everyone. The security forces had become something like cultural ambassadors, showing both civilian populations that cooperation wasn't just possible, but actually superior to the old competitive approaches. Admiral Taehoon's fleet had evolved into a permanent, peacekeeping presence throughout the sector. The human ships no longer hid their capabilities, but they also no longer needed to demonstrate them. Both species had accepted that human military technology was simply beyond their ability to challenge. More importantly, both species had discovered that they didn't want to challenge it. Human protection allowed them to focus on rebuilding their civilizations rather than defending against each other. The space station that had been built during the original demonstration had expanded into a major diplomatic and trade hub. Representatives from dozens of other species now came to study the successful integration of three very different civilizations. Captain Heijin managed the station's operations, coordinating trade agreements and research partnerships that were spreading the benefits of cooperation throughout the local galactic region. Other species are asking how we ended a 23-year war in 6 hours, she reported to Admiral Taehoon during one of their regular meetings. The real answer is that we didn't end their war. We showed them how to end it themselves. The Yesi. Economic integration was proceeding faster than anyone had expected. Valeth crystal technology, Thurok bioengineering, and human manufacturing were creating products that revolutionized everyday life for all three species. Combined medical technology could heal injuries that would have been fatal just years before. Integrated communication systems allowed real-time translation between harmonic, biochemical, and electromagnetic signals. Hybrid architecture created buildings that were simultaneously beautiful, adaptive, and efficient. The younger generation was leading this integration. Children who had grown up during the war were now young adults who saw interspecies cooperation as normal and natural. Young Valeth artists created crystal sculptures that incorporated living biomechanical components. Young Thurok engineers grew biosystems that responded to harmonic commands. Young humans learned to work with both crystal and biotechnologies as naturally as they worked with metal and electronics. The first anniversary celebration was held at the main research station, with representatives from all three species gathering to commemorate the end of the war and the beginning of their alliance. War Prime Daiho, now serving as Thurok Ambassador for Life Sciences, addressed the mixed crowd in all three languages simultaneously. We thought strength meant the power to destroy enemies. We learned that true strength means the wisdom to create allies. Commander Hyan, now Director of Valeth Cultural Restoration, spoke about the rediscovery of his people's artistic traditions. War taught us to build weapons. Peace is teaching us to build wonders. Admiral Tehun concluded the ceremony with words that would be remembered throughout the sector. To the war that ended not in victory or defeat, but in the recognition that some battles are too important to fight, and some enemies too valuable to destroy. The celebration continued for days, but it was more than just a party. It was a demonstration to the galaxy that interspecies cooperation could create something better than any single civilization could achieve alone. The former enemies had become partners in the truest sense. Their combined knowledge was accelerating. Technological advancement throughout the sector. Their joint colonies were becoming models for interspecies community building. Their integrated military forces were providing security for dozens of smaller civilizations. Dr. Yuna's final report to Earth summarized the transformation. Both species have not only recovered from their war, they have become stronger than they ever were before it began. The integration of their technologies with ours is producing advances that none of our species could have achieved independently. The quantum crystal research had led to breakthroughs in faster-than-light communication. The combined biocrystal medical technology was revolutionizing healing throughout known space. The integrated defensive systems were providing protection for entire star systems. But the most important achievement was less tangible. Three very different species had learned to work together as equals, each contributing their unique strengths, while learning from the other's expertise. The war that had consumed two civilizations for decades was now remembered mainly as the prelude to an alliance that was changing the galaxy. The hate that had once seemed eternal had been transformed into cooperation that promised to endure for millennia. Young beings of all three species were growing up in a universe where interspecies cooperation was normal, where different kinds of intelligence were valued for their diversity, and where conflicts were resolved through creativity rather than violence. The human fleet remained in the sector, but their role had evolved from peacekeepers to partners. They were no longer preventing war between former enemies. They were helping to build a future that none of the three species could have imagined alone. As Admiral Tehun looked out at the thriving stations, the joint colonies, and the mixed crews working throughout the sector, he realized that humanity had gained something more valuable than territory or resources. They had gained allies who would stand with them as they continued to explore the galaxy's infinite possibilities. The war that had lasted decades and ended in hours had become the foundation for a peace that would last forever.